Welcome to Arise Life, a community of believers being equipped, empowered, and released into their destiny. For more information, go to ariselife.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
All right, well, the title for today is Don't Miss God. And as I was sitting this week with the Lord and thinking about what He might have for us, I had a lot of ideas, but none of them really felt like they were quite right. Until I started looking at some moments in Jesus' life and how many people missed the God right in front of them, or missed what was happening in that moment right in front of them. And I was thinking about how we as believers, we often come into Christianity, into faith, or into life with this expectation of the way things are going to look, or these pictures of what our walk with the Lord's going to look like, or what motherhood's going to look like, or what God's going to look like, or how He's going to show up. And so many times, almost always, those pictures are wrong. And I think a lot of times in those moments, which is pretty much every day, we miss Jesus in the moment. And so I feel like there's an invitation to a Christianity, to a faith where God is with you in the moment. He didn't come and die just so that we could go be with Him in heaven. He came and died so that we could experience Him every day. As I was talking to him about this, he was reminding me of the fact that He is a God that is always in the present. I don't know where my notes are, but I'm going to keep going. He created time. So He doesn't exist within time. He doesn't exist in the past, and He doesn't exist in the future. Yes, He worked in the past. We can see evidence of Him in the past. And He will be in the future, but He is always a present God. And so when we don't meet with Him in the present, we miss Him in that moment. And so I want to share with you some of my story, and also share with you some stories from the Bible about people who missed God, and make some conclusions about why we miss God, and then what do we do about that? How do we not miss God in the moment? So I want to start. Lord, where are we starting? In the moment. I'm going to start with the Pharisees. They're the obvious ones who missed Jesus. And the Lord showed me something this week, and I want to share it with you because it's something I never saw about them. And I connect with the Pharisees. If you haven't heard my story, I connect deeply with the Pharisees. So we're going to start there. So we're going to actually start in Exodus chapter 30. And we're going to start in verse 12. And so this is going to help you understand the story in the life of Jesus. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites," just making sure we're on the same page. "Say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between you and me for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. Observe the Sabbath, because it is holy to you. Anyone who desecrates it is to be put to death. Those who do any work on that day must be cut off from their people. For 6 days work is to be done, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death. The Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for the generations to come as a lasting covenant. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. In 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day He rested and was refreshed." Okay, so this is the background. And as I was reading this, I was like, I can see why the Pharisees were a little uptight about Jesus doing work on the Sabbath. Now, they misunderstood what maybe work was supposed to look like. But that's pretty strong language there in Exodus. Anybody who does work on the Sabbath is to be put to death. I think we're all glad we're not under the law, because we would all, right now, need to be put to death. Don't worry, we are not under the law. We're under the new covenant. But the religious leaders had seen what had happened in history and how the people had been attacked and gone into exile, and they did not want that to happen again. So they were following every letter, more than every letter of the law. They were going to the extra extreme so as not to accidentally work on the Sabbath. And here we find Jesus coming in and offending them. And so now we are going to look in Mark chapter 3. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful to do on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Okay, Jesus is standing right in front of them, and he performs a miraculous sign. And you might think, how could they miss Jesus? But they had this picture of who Jesus or the Messiah was going to be. So come up with me. Caleb, you want to be my scribe? Sure. Come up with me some of the reasons they missed Jesus. Call them out if you... That's me. 1-888. Anyway, why did they miss Jesus? The law, okay, the law. Trying to live up to the law. Mm-hmm. He looked immoral. Offense. You're doing just as well as I would. I failed spelling. I'm only in 6th grade. Fear and offense. Can you write down both of those? Just do your best. Spelling doesn't count. Anybody? Expectations.
Something about image. They probably were expecting something.
The image in their head?
Yeah.
It didn't match.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Like he was just normal. Like there wasn't anything that stood out.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they were expecting like some lore type of image.
Yeah, they had an expectation of what Jesus was, or the Messiah was going to look like, and Jesus did not.
He's like,
Yeah, he did not match their expectations.
Yeah.
Is a threat to their authority.
A threat to their authority, yes. Write that down.
Jealous of their anointing.
Yeah, jealous of his anointing. Okay, that's a pretty good list. It's okay? No shame, because I would have to have shame, because you got your spelling ability from me, apparently. So we see the Pharisees missing Jesus because they had expectations he didn't meet. They didn't fit. He didn't fit the image they had. They were afraid of what it meant if he was. He was a threat to what they had already going for them. He didn't recognize them. He didn't pat them on the back and say, "Good job, you guys are following the law really well." Yeah, he seemed to contradict what they expected God to say. They expected a God who would come and make sure everybody was following the rules. I was, and sometimes still am, that person. I want people to follow the rules. I'm really sorry. I'm working on it. But that would have lined up with what I expected of the Lord. That's a lot of what I expected the church to be. Here's what you're doing wrong, and here's where you need to line up. He expected not somebody who would come and just forgive and step over the law to reach people. He expected somebody who would draw an even finer line of what you had to step over. But we all knew that the Pharisees missed Jesus. So let's look at some other people who missed Jesus as he was standing in their midst. We're going to talk about some of his disciples. So this is going to be Luke chapter 24. And we're going to be in verse 13. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to the village. This is after Jesus has died. So this is where we're at. Now on that same day, 2 of them, his followers, were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was going to be the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went out to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in and stayed with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Okay, so these are men who very likely walked with Jesus on the earth. They run back and they tell the disciples, like they heard the firsthand account. They were with Jesus. They were part of the group. They may not have been the 12 apostles, but they were with the group that Jesus was with. And still, they missed Jesus standing before their very eyes, the risen Lord. So give me some reasons why they might have missed Jesus. I'm going to come right.
Well, it's not every day you see that guy.
It's true. It's true. They had heard the report, but they didn't expect to run into Jesus. They had heard a report that maybe he was alive, but they didn't expect. They're still mourning. Yeah, it says their faces were downcast. They were in mourning. I didn't mean for you to read. Yeah, they were kept from recognizing him.
It breaks their primary, right? Like they were worldly. They weren't thinking kingdom, right? It breaks their reality.
Okay, so they were not thinking about God, what God could do. They were thinking about the real world, what was possible in the real world.
I feel like they still did not understand what like his sacrifice really meant.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that they had like this other picture and they didn't understand why he did what he did and what that meant. So until not that related and it moved on. So I just feel like they just.
Yeah, they didn't recognize what his sacrifice, that it was required.
Right.
They didn't recognize that, and then until he broke the bread, they did not see that it was Jesus.
But he couldn't see beyond the disappointment.
Okay, they couldn't see beyond their disappointment. And part of their disappointment was they tell him, they say, we had hoped he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. But he didn't. And even if he raised from the dead, he did not do what they expected him to do. So even if he came back from the dead, they're already confused about what the plan is now. Anything else?
I think God was more glorified by the sudden revealing and their excitement from it than if they just see him on the road and talk about it.
And recognize. So there was something to that sudden revealing. And I think for us there is, because I think a lot of times we walk along and we don't realize Jesus is right there with us until there's a spark, like he does something we recognize, like where he broke the bread, and then we're like, oh, Jesus has been here all along. He's the one who's been sitting with me in this. Okay, you can pause on that for a minute. Thank you. And then the last person in the scripture I want to look at is Mary. And so that passage is in Luke chapter 2, verse 41. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival, according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart. All right, so Mary has been given, we know Mary was given a word by the angel who Jesus was going to be. And it tells us back in that story that she treasured those things in her heart. But we see here that she clearly didn't have a full understanding of who Jesus was or where he would be. They didn't look in the temple for 3 days. They're looking around for him for 3 days. And she has been with him and watched him grow up. And so here's a picture of another person much, much closer to Jesus who also missed him. So the Pharisees, the rulers who were looking for a Messiah, they missed the Messiah. His friends who were following with him, walking with him every day, they missed him. Even his mother missed what was going on and what was happening with him. She did not understand the full picture of who he was. So why might she have missed seeing Jesus?
She got in the routine.
The routine?
She didn't really have a detailed plan of what he was going to do. She was given a word, but there were no specifics of how this was going to happen.
Okay, so she was given no specifics, no outline, no timeline, no manual. I'm like most of us mothers, we're given no manual.
Exactly.
But she did have that one word. Okay, what else?
At the end of the day, he was just her little boy.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he was her son. She didn't expect. And maybe as the Messiah, she expected him to just never do anything wrong. Maybe she expected him to never disappear like that. What else? Anything else?
I think him being in the temple, to me, he didn't feel he was doing anything wrong. That was his destiny.
Yeah, he didn't feel like he was doing anything wrong.
Like, this is where you're going to find me, so come.
Yeah, I believe at this point he's about 12 years old. I think it says that. 12. And so at that time, 12 years old looks a little bit different right now. But at that time, that was about the time that they were, like in the Jewish culture, that's when they become men. And so it's when he started to feel like he was taking on the role he was called to. So yeah, we're not necessarily saying that he was doing something wrong. Mary just did not expect him to be there.
And just like every one of us, just the fear of having fear of something happening to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she had fear of something happening to him. And fear likely clouded her thinking. Fear probably kept her from being like, he's probably safe in the church. No, fear told her all the bad places he could be. Yeah, yeah, the guilt of losing the Messiah. Yeah, I'm sure Mary was going through a lot in those 3 days. So, all right, well, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of ways we can miss God, whether we are looking at him as a religious leader, as a friend, or even as a close family member, even as a father, or as a brother. We can miss God. No matter how close we are to him, we can miss him. So to recap some of the ways that we miss God, sometimes we have ideas about how God will show up in a situation or who he will be to us, and he doesn't show up in that way. The Pharisees had a picture of how he would show up and who he would be to them. He was not that. His friends had an idea of how he would show up and who he would be to them, and he did not show up in that way. His mother had a picture of how he would show up in the situation or who he would be to her, and he did not show up in that way. And we often have ideas about how God will show up for us or who he will be to us, and he does not show up in those ways. And so then we get disappointed and we draw back, or we press in and we ask him. We're truthful about how we feel, and we say, what's going on? We miss God because it doesn't look perfect, and we expected it to be perfect. They expected the Messiah to be perfect in accordance to the law and their law that they had set up, and that he would commend them for how perfectly they were keeping the law. His disciples expected him to come into his own kingdom, and it would be perfect, and Roman rule would be overthrown, and it would all be perfect. And it didn't show up like that. And Mary expected maybe the perfect little boy, and he didn't show up the way she expected him to be perfect. He may still have been perfect, but not in the way that she was expecting. Fear. We can miss God with fear, because if God shows up in these ways we don't expect, that's scary. When Jesus showed up in a way that the Pharisees didn't understand, that was very scary to them. They didn't know what to do with him. They didn't know how to respond. And I would say some of them probably even had an inkling that maybe he was the Messiah, but it was terrifying because he didn't look like the Messiah they wanted. And they're like, maybe if we just get rid of him, we can get a better one. Like, this is not the one we want. We really, really want the Messiah we were looking for, and this one is not. He's doing stuff that looks like the Messiah, but he's also doing stuff that's really scary. And maybe we'll be led astray, or maybe this won't turn out the way we want.
Didn't live up to his expectations.
Yeah, he did not live up to the expectations. The disciples I mean, we see Peter's fear. Peter denies him. We see these men on the road, and they're like, don't you know what's been happening? Like, all this has been happening. Everyone's in an uproar, and like, we really don't know what to do. We don't know what's happening. We don't. And his mother, she comes out right and tells him, we have been anxiously looking for you. We have been afraid. It doesn't look like the dreams we had for ourselves. The Pharisees, they had dreams for themselves. They were always jostling for position. And Jesus did not show up in a way that looked like any of their dreams would come true. In fact, all of them would be dashed. His people, all their dreams they're constantly arguing over who's first place and who gets to sit at his right hand and who gets to sit at his left hand when he comes into glory. And they were thinking, glory is right now and we'll have thrones on earth. And those perfect plans didn't pan out that way. And I don't know exactly what Mary's dreams were. Mary is probably looking down now and a little bit disappointed with the way the Catholic Church has portrayed her as perfect. But here on earth, she did not understand everything that Jesus' life was going to look like. And I'm guessing when the angel came and told her, you're going to be the mother of the Messiah, she expected it to look one way, and it looked it. And the dreams she had and the dreams she dreamed for herself as part of that did not look. I don't think the Lord told her, and your son's going to die on a cross for all the world. And I'm pretty sure that she really had to adjust her view of God after that. As it's Mother's Day, this had me thinking all about how my pictures and my expectations of being a mother. I had all these beautiful pictures. It's all I wanted when I was a little girl, was to grow up and get married and have children. I never wanted to be on this stage. I wanted what is the verse? I wanted a 1 Thessalonians 4:11 life, which is make it your ambition to live a quiet life and go about your own business. And I would like to sign up for that life. That was the life I wanted, was a quiet life with a husband and kids. And things were going pretty well. I mean, not perfect, but like within the realm of perfect enough that it felt like things were going okay. We were headed in the right direction. And I remember just sitting at work sometimes just thinking about when I had my first child and I would get to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom and how beautiful it would be and how much better it would be than going to work. And let's just say it did not go the way I anticipated. Somehow I missed the memo that motherhood was 24/7, not just 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I missed the memo that it's not all snuggles and happiness and rainbows and unicorns and I think honestly, in God's graciousness, He gave me a child that really challenged me, because otherwise I would not be here. We would not be at this church if I had gotten the perfect child who just did everything I wanted and made me look really good. And because I thought I had it all together. And I had this perfect little picture of what things were going to look like. And because I followed Jesus and I went to church and I was in Bible studies and I helped lead Bible studies, like my life was going to turn out the way it was supposed to. It was going to look the way it was supposed to because I was doing the right things. And I thought those were the dreams God had for me too. I expected the Lord to show up in the situation by continuing to let me manage things myself. Pride and self-effort is another way we will miss God. You can see that in the Pharisees again. You can see that in my life. I thought I had it all together. And then I had a baby who didn't sleep, so I didn't sleep, who cried a lot of the time, and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I would be prepared because I loved babies. I would babysit all the time. But this one, no matter what I did, I was always doing the wrong thing. And since I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't thinking clearly. All my emotions were a mess. And I didn't have anybody, and I didn't think I needed anybody to help me. My parents were working full-time. My husband's mother was busy with a sick husband. None of my friends had kids. They were all working. We were at a very small church. There wasn't a whole lot. There was one woman who had a lot of advice for me, and none of it worked. And so I thought I was the problem, and not just that maybe she had different babies. None of the tricks worked. Nothing. So, but I missed God in that season. But he was still very gentle and kind to me. He was still very loving, and he spoke gently to me, but I missed him. Because instead of seeking him out and telling him what was going on, I tried harder. I covered up the fact that there was a problem. I really was unhappy every time my husband told anyone that it was a struggle, because it's not supposed to be a struggle. We have everything together. Don't look behind the curtain. And I thought just so much of it was me. And in a sense, it was me, because I needed to come to the end of myself before I could find what God really had for me. But I didn't realize what direction I was supposed to go. So instead of towards the Lord, I kind of separated and isolated, both from other people and from the Lord. So it was really kind of offensive to me that this dream I had was now a nightmare, honestly, in some ways. And I started to just look for ways to escape reality. And I, for a long time, lived in the future. I escaped to the future, dreaming about what might happen in the future, because this season isn't forever. Everybody kept telling me, this season isn't forever. I'm like, okay, well, I will dream about the next season when I will plan for the next season. I will dream for the next season. And the next season was different, but no less was I able to manage it on my own. No less was I able to. So then I escaped to the next season, and I did not know how to live in the present. I did not know how to live in the present with the Lord. I didn't know how to live in the present with myself. I didn't know how to live in the present with my children who needed me in the present. And so I gave into things like escapism. Thankfully, healthier ways of escapism. I loved to read fiction, and so I would just grab a book and I would escape. But then the more you do that, the more dopamine, then you need more, then you need to just, you go back to it. And so instead of going to Jesus, I'm having a hard day, I'm like, as soon as the kids go down for a nap, I'm going to go read that book. I escaped into planning for the future. Every time I could, I would plan a trip, or when's the next time we can get away from real life? But I lived in this better world in my head. Things will get better. But I did not take it before the Lord. And so, but at the same time, I felt secure because, I went to church. I felt like I hadn't set the Lord on a shelf, but I didn't realize he wanted to be there with me in each moment, in each day. And so I missed so many days where I could have invited him in. In fact, he was right there. He was right there. But sometimes we get frustrated with him because, again, he didn't follow our plan. He didn't follow our plan, and I still get frustrated with him when he makes me go on these chases through Scripture. Like, can you just give me the answer? Do we have to go? Can I not just have it? Can it not just be magic? Like, I would really like the magic version of Jesus, please. The magic version would be really nice today. But so I'm sure whether you can relate to that story, I'm sure you can relate to another story of where you tried to escape, or where the ideas of what you thought God had for you didn't pan out, or what you thought was going to be perfect ended up being not perfect, where fear took over because it didn't look the way you expected, or where God offended you deeply because you expected him to look one way and he looked another way. Maybe you live in the past, maybe you live in the future, maybe you're better than me on all my good days and you've always lived in the present, but you haven't lived in the present with God. Maybe you've lived like I have in my vain imaginings. I've used my imaginings to escape from the Lord rather than to go towards the Lord. Maybe you have been like me and you've been afraid to sit with your emotions and you've given into escapisms and distractions. Or maybe you've just placed limitations on what God can do. You know, I didn't think God could show up in that space, honestly. Like, I expected to magically become my mother, I guess. I expected all of a sudden that I would have this desire to take care of everyone's needs. And if you know me, I don't even like taking care of my own needs. If someone would please just make sure I have food, because I will not feed myself. And now I have a child, and then another child, and then another child to feed. Like, I felt like God couldn't step in because I was limited, and so God was limited by who I was. And maybe you also feel secure because you've had victory in the past. I mean, I was still leading a Bible study at church. Like, I was still fine with God, and that's true. I was fine with God, but I was missing what he paid for in terms of my everyday. He didn't just want you to come and be in heaven with him. He wants you to have a better life now as you walk with him, hand in hand through whatever you face now. He didn't come to save you out of, as the disciples wanted him to save them out of their situations. He came to save them inside of and to walk with them through where they were. So what do we do about it? Well, one of the first things we need to do is we need to tell the truth, but we don't need to dwell. So we need to truth tell, but don't dwell. So some of us are really good at dwelling in the truth. There was a season of my life where, this was probably the same season where I was dreaming about motherhood, where the work Brian and I were doing, we worked at the same office. The office smelled horrible. It was poor working conditions. Our boss had some mental health issues going on. And so every day when we would get home, I just needed to vent, and I needed to tell all about how I felt. And I was like, I just need to get it out. And honestly, I realized all these years later, that was probably the least healthy thing I could do, to just repeat over and over the negative. Just repeat it over and over out loud, because I was just dwelling. I was dwelling in it. I was not taking it to the Lord. I was just being a victim. But there are also times where we go to the other extreme. Instead of dwelling in it, we just ignore that there's a problem. There's, like I did, no problems. There's no problems. My world is falling apart, and I haven't slept in however many days, but there's no problems here. Motherhood is great. We're all happy. So be honest with yourself and be honest with others. That's the first step about where you're at. And that could be something big or it could be something little. It does not have to be your deepest, darkest secret. It's whatever is on your heart today. It is today. It is a present, today honesty. It is not a yesterday honesty. My honesty today is that my kids were fighting over me in the middle of service. One of them felt very rejected because the other one was hugging me, and so I am working with the Lord on how to love my children with the limited ability that I have to be one person. So that's a little thing. That's a little thing today. But what is today's issue? What is weighing you down? What is holding you today? Be honest with yourself and others. And you may have to ask the Lord what the truth is, because sometimes we've pushed it down so far that we don't know what the truth is. We just feel off. I feel off, Lord. I don't know why. This actually is literally how I learned to deal with my emotions. I was like, Lord, I have no idea what emotion I'm feeling. He's like, well, look at the problems that are coming up. Is there rage? Then you're probably afraid. Is there, anyway, so I had to look at the problems to figure out what I was actually feeling to get to the root of why I was feeling that way. So sometimes you need to let the Lord help you walk out what you've pushed down so far. And then invite him to speak about whatever part of it he wants. Me. I am so bad about telling the Lord what I want him to talk about. Like, Lord, what do I do about these children who have so much jealousy? And he's like, well, maybe we need to talk about something else that's not that. Like, rarely does he talk about the part I want to talk about, but usually he is talking about some aspect of it that needs to be dealt with first. So invite him to speak about whatever part of it he wants, and then sit with that without escaping. And I think that might be the hardest thing, this isn't dwelling, this is to sit in that uncomfortable place with the vulnerable discomfort of the process. And honestly, I'm not great at it, but in the moments where I do it with the Lord, there is such good fruit. There is such good fruit when I do not escape. And honestly, part of the reason I can't escape now is because he told me, I guess we're going on a year and a half now. Not this past January, but the January before, the Lord took away all my escapism. He was like, you are going to fast all of them at once. You're going to fast reading. You're going to fast planning. You're going to fast reading the news. You're going to fast, I can't even remember all of them. You're going to fast them all. And let me tell you, I don't remember, but I probably wasn't very fun for the first month. Because I'm sure there were withdrawal symptoms going on. And that is also part of how I began to learn how to live in the present, because he asked me. Now, I'm not suggesting he's asking you to give up everything. You talk to him about it. He deals with each one of us in our own way. But I will tell you, I learned a lot about myself when I stopped escaping. And I learned I hate planning. I was doing it out of fear. And I always thought it was my superpower. I'm really good at planning. I love planning. Give me something to plan. Now, when I have to plan something, don't ask my husband about planning our most recent trip. It was not, I was like, I don't want to think about this anymore. Please just, let's be done with it. I realized that so much of who I was actually a protective against having to sit with the Lord in the discomfort of the process. So, he'll start gentle with you. Just sit with him for 5 minutes in the discomfort. Okay, let's start there. Don't give up everything. But if he does ask you, you can come talk to me and I'll commiserate with you. And we can be mad at him together about how offensive he is. And then ask God, this is the key. Ask God, what does hope in his goodness, what does hope in God's goodness look like in this situation? Not, how are we getting out of this? Not what's on the other side, but what does hope in his goodness look like in this situation? And I don't know what that's going to look like for you, but I know and I trust in his goodness that it's going to be beautiful. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I am still not happy that I'm up here.
We are.
But I have such hope in his goodness towards me, and in his goodness towards y'all, and in his goodness towards the world, that I know it is worth it because there is goodness in this moment. There is goodness in this moment today, and I'm not going to miss today because I want to get away from it, or because I'm going to dream about tomorrow. I'm going to sit in this moment and look for his goodness. And I'm going to trust that what he says I should hope in is true. When I decide what to hope in, it always goes wrong. Let me tell you, I always hope in the wrong thing. But when I hope in his goodness and I ask him what that looks like, man, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And don't go it alone. Please tell somebody what truth you are working on. Because I have learned largely from the last few months in the group, the Friday group, that sharing things together in community in a vulnerable way is where we get a lot of our strength. And when we try to go it alone, or we try to isolate, or we just think, well, I can tell the Lord the truth alone, and you can walk through it alone. You don't have to tell somebody here, but I ask you to share it with somebody in your life, your spouse, a family member, a friend that you can trust, or somebody here at church. What is the truth about the situation that weighs on you today? And what is the hope that God is speaking? Tell them the hope as well, because they can partner with you. Don't just ask them to partner with you in the hard part. Invite them to partner with you in the hope. Because you need people around you to encourage you on days where you are not willing to sit with it. Where you are not willing to be honest. Those people can come back and encourage you in the Lord, not just with well, you should try harder. I can say, oh, don't you remember the Lord said this is the hope? Hold on to that. Hope in God's goodness does not change the circumstances, but it changes our attitude, and it reframes our expectations, and it redirects our outlook. So let me pray for us. Lord, I just thank you so much that your goodness is bigger than whatever it is that is coming after us today. Whatever fear or doubt, whatever loneliness or anger or grief, or your goodness, it isn't limited by what our experience is, or what we believe about the experience, or what we believe about ourselves. Lord, I just ask that as everyone in their heart seeks to ask you what the goodness is, what the hope is in their situation, that you will meet them and you will shine your light on the hope that you have for them in that situation. And Lord, I ask that we would be brave enough to sit in the discomfort of those moments that weren't perfect, these things that make us feel broken, and that you would guide our steps. I just pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
For more information, go to ariselife.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.